Hello, my name is John Cornicello, and I welcome you to my series of live interactive photo conversations. You can check the schedule at cornicello.com/conversations for upcoming events and for a list of past events and the recordings. Today, my guest is James Haefner. James' career in photography spans the last 4 decades. He's an accomplished automotive and advertising photographer, and he's seen a tremendous amount of change over time. And he is one of the more novel ways of dealing with upside down and reversed images on the ground glass of his camera here, as you can see here. So anyway, I'd like you to welcome today James Haefner.
Hello, everyone.
Welcome.
Hello, Jim.
Yeah, well, welcome. I really appreciate it. Alan Rado, how are you?
Hey, Jim, how are you?
Excellent, excellent. So, well, I really appreciate everyone joining us today. This is going to be a lot of fun. I just not lived through, but all the effort that I put into finding all these old pictures, I relived a lot of wonderful memories. And many of you who worked on these jobs with me, I think will enjoy seeing them again. My career started in 1979, but it really, I guess, started when I graduated from RIT. And why isn't it not?
Put your focus, click on your PowerPoint.
My PowerPoint, oh.
And now you should be able to advance.
There we go. Okay, so I graduated. Here I am with my buddy Bob Grant. Moments after we graduated from RIT, which was a big time in my life. Made my parents very happy. I decided after the field trips to New York, where I found that we couldn't get paid if we went to New York to be assistants. They were overrun, the photographers were overrun with assistants. So they basically would let you work there for nothing if you wanted to. So I decided to come back to Detroit. I like the more practical approach to all of that, like getting paid. But when I was at RIT, I did a lot of things that were not what I ended up doing for my career. I was more into fashion and people. And I'll just show you a couple pictures that I had done when I was at school. I liked shooting beautiful women, among other things. Hey, John, I have this window up on the top of my screen. Does everybody see that where it says mute and stop video?
No.
No? Okay, good. All right, and then here's another shot that I've always loved. I actually was one of the pioneers in using a film called GAF 500 and sold GAF 500, or the GAF Film Company, a concept which they turned into an ad campaign called The Art and the Artists. And it was based on this very grainy look that they put myself and Sarah Moon together on. And unfortunately, GAF pulled out of the film business about 2 weeks before the ads were to run. So I ended up as a car photographer. As an assistant, I wanted to learn everything I could about automotive production. And I was an assistant for 3 years. Using the view camera correctly, a large format 8x10 was critical because the majority of the images that we made were shot with 8x10. Transparency film, either Kodak or Fuji, later Fuji. But here I am, I'm using my 8x10. As you can see, it's not as easy as people think. But this was a sample I did in the early 80s just for fun. And the person holding me up is Joe Miller, who might be on with us, I'm not sure. Joe was my assistant for close to 10 years and was responsible for a lot of some of the darkroom magic that I became known for. Early in my career, I did some cool shots. This was a poster that I did for Ford Racing. The art studio McNamara's was the design house, and Gary Short was the art director. And this got a lot of attention. It was a completely different look from what was being done at the time. I did another sample, that was this black and white Lotus, which got a lot of attention too. And I just simply taped black squares onto one of the flying flats in my studio to get the checkerboard effect. But it was kind of a fun project to work on. So at this time, I want to note that after these two shots and a lot of automotive work in a couple of years, I got the attention of the creative director at Campbell Ewald on the catalogs. His name was Gene Butera. He passed away a couple of years ago. And Gene was instrumental in my career. He saw something in me and my work that he wanted for Chevrolet. And he put me on for the rest of his career on these catalogs. And then I continued working on Chevrolet catalogs probably until about 2010. But here's a picture of Gene when we were on one of our shoots in Los Angeles, which we would do for about 6 weeks every year, at least a big spring shoot. And then probably we go back in the fall for a smaller shoot. But Gene was a talented designer, really good photographer, and a wonderful man. So, and I also want to take a minute to thank all the people that helped me on all these jobs. It takes a whole team of people to pull these pictures off, from producers, stylists, location scouts, assistants, the car prep people. Everybody worked incredibly hard to make these pictures a success. So Gene was into a lot of vibrant color. There was a movie called Tron that came out in the early 80s, and he thought we should apply that to car photography. So we did pictures like this next shot. This was the introduction of the Astro van. And this picture was a compilation done in the darkroom. It's a set in my studio. The people in the background, there was a painted background on the wall. The car was there, but the people were all lit with a blue direct strobe light. And then I would come in, they would leave, and I'd relight for the car. And then in the darkroom, we'd strip the two together. And that was pretty amazing at the time. I mean, they were doing strips on dye transfers for years and years, but to do them on 8x10 and have a photographer deliver you a piece of film that was in many instances basically ready to go was pretty novel. So this is an example of that. And then I couldn't find the darkroom films for this image, but here's another Chevy truck shot that is kind of similar. So although I was out on location, I shot this in the Omaha area. And we had a preconceived idea of what the whole thing was going to look like. And that's why we gelled the sky down. Then back in the studio, the story of this truck, I guess, was a new engine, as I remember. And so I shot this very wide angle shot of an engine, either with a 120 millimeter lens on a 8x10, or it might be
some vignetting there.
Yeah, it might have been a 90 because of all the vignetting. And so we gelled the lights to reflect what we had shot on location. Here's a picture of the mask that was made of the motor. And then we even, because it was a Vortec engine, as I recall, we wanted to comp in a tornado. So out of chicken wire and cotton batting and some spray paint, we created this tornado, and it all went together into a picture like this. And so this was like in '83, I think, that this picture was created. And then, there was some retouching I'm sure they had to do, but it was well received. On the same lines, this is later, this is in '87. And we were doing like weeks upon weeks of studio photography in Los Angeles for Chevrolet. And this was a Corvette image that I was one of 4 photographers selected to be spotlighted in the 1988 Corvette catalog. And we were all, each photographer was given the assignment to do whatever we wanted. So I came up with the concept of an intergalactic, I've always been into sci-fi, an intergalactic design museum, and the Corvette being such a beautiful car, that's where it would be, its final resting spot would be. So this is a studio, the basic studio shot. That floor surface was done practically. It was 1-inch gator board with mitered edges. And then it was painted, and I think this isn't a final piece of film because I think we put a gloss coat on it before we shot the final film. And then I hired an artist in the San Francisco area to create a foreground element out of crystal. And it was this plaque here that the art director I was working with on the other catalog shots, he did the type for me. His name was Steve Taganaga, wonderful guy. And and of course, we have a Chevy bow tie there too, and an intergalactic hand. So those 2 pictures go together and look like this. You can see the surface has got a little more contrast too. So that's cool, but because we were still working with these glowy colors, I needed to add this to the picture. And then the final art looks like this. And again, you know, it was well received. They took it out of the catalog and made ads out of it and stuff like that. It was kind of fun. But I worked in other areas too. Back in the 80s when I was starting out, the Detroit automotive photography scene was really experimental. The more ideas you had that you could successfully pull off, the more business you would get. And so I did this kind of thing, which was really technical but dependent on lighting and concept. But here's a shot that was more concept than anything, although there is set building. This idea came from Lee Iacocca, who was running Chrysler, and he had just bought Jeep and announced that it was the most iconic brand, one of the most iconic brands the world had ever seen. So that got me thinking, and I decided to take this picture as maybe the first in a series of images of how Jeep has been appreciated for many, many, many years. And I then made a print of it, and I wrote a letter to Lee Iacocca. I'd gotten his address, business address, and I sent it to him. And I still have the letter with his notes to his marketing people about what a cool idea, and let's do something with this. And they did. They made ads and posters out of it. I kind of won the battle, but lost the war. The creative director on that Jeep business at the time was furious that I had usurped his responsibility. And I didn't work on Jeep for many years after that, probably 10 years after that it took for me to get another Jeep ad. But anyhow, I'm still very proud of the picture. I mean, that's 1 sheet of film. Yeah, that's 1 sheet of film. So another cool project I did for Chrysler, and this was for Chrysler of Europe. And the reason I show you some of these pictures is not because they're wonderful pictures, but because of the amount of production that went into them. Chrysler of Europe came up with a concept of red, white, and blue. All the elements in the picture had to be red, white, and blue. And so I found this building, and they let me paint it red. And the surface is a carpet pad that's been sprayed blue, and we took the picture. And I don't recall why we could paint the building red, but I don't recall taking the paint off. So either they were tearing it down or they thought it was the way they wanted it. I don't know. Not all the pictures were that much work. Here's another shot where again, we just used a carpet pad for a surface, painted it red, and then used the blue in the sky and the small set piece behind the car. But anyhow, it was an interesting concept, I thought. The idea of how to photograph a car from day one, you know, whenever car photography became popular, was that the car should be a jewel. It should be photographed in a way that the detail is wonderfully rendered, dramatically rendered. You know, all the shapes are seen, but it's still got a lot of impact. And so we got into building sets because it was easier to position a car in a big tarmac at an airport and then build a simple set or not so simple set. And then that's the result, or here's one of the resulting pictures. The back car or truck is up on a flatbed, semi-flatbed, and then the rocks are all fake rocks that you get from a set shop. I think we got a couple truckloads of these things. But that way I'm able to set the car or the trucks up so that they light perfectly at sunset. And so a whole team of people are involved in doing all this. It's, you know, two or three, four set builders, and, you know, it's just a lot of effort. But, you know, this is not as much effort as some shots were. This next picture I did for Citroën, and every year Citroën would come and visit with me for about 3 weeks, sometimes twice a year, and we made a lot of cool pictures. And in this case, this is what they wanted. They wanted the vehicle on a dock and a couple and all this stuff, but we couldn't really find that. So we had to build it as a set. And this was shot at a lake north of Los Angeles. And let's see, my location scout is on the left, and he might have been producing at that time. The clients are next to the truck. I'm up on the ladder, and it looks like there's even a secondary camera set up beyond that. I think that might have been Debbie here with the binoculars checking out the talent to make sure they look all right. And anyhow, that's kind of a behind the scenes shot. Here's another shot of the dock before it went into the water. It's a big deal to make that thing and not have the car fall off of it. So we were always a little concerned what was going to happen, but anyhow, we pulled it off. The next shot is another big set shot, but you don't see that it's a big set until you see this picture, which we utilize the same body of water. And I built that body of water from telephone poles backfilled with sand, huge pool liners, and thousands of gallons of water, which would have to keep being refilled because we were shooting in Phoenix and it evaporated or inevitably leaked. But that's probably the biggest pond I've ever built. And it was kind of fun. I used a strobe box to light the car. And then in this, I'll go back to the other shot, I have strobe filling into the front of that vehicle. So again, this was, in order to justify the cost of that pond, we did a number of pictures at that location.
So do you use generators to power the strobes out there?
Yeah, I would imagine a big generator, the kind you tow behind a truck. Yeah, I mean, it was a huge effort. And quite often I'd be working at this was a tarmac that they built at an airport called Deer Valley, and it was way underutilized. So I would be working out there, and 100 yards away, there'd be another photographer shooting another shot for the same client. Sometimes we'd have 3 or 4 studios on this tarmac, shooting for a couple weeks. So here's a shot for Ford that was shot at the same location. You get an idea of the production involved. I mean, I'm doing two, these are both shots of mine, so I'm doing two majors. And in the background there, I see a water truck, and there's other sets being built. It was quite an effort, and but it was predictable, and probably in the long haul a little less costly than trying to find locations and being dependent on the weather and so on and so forth. Not that we were not dependent on the weather, but when you're in Phoenix area in May, you usually have pretty good weather. Here's another pretty interesting set. And for weeks, this was a part of a Chevrolet project. I had my location scout looking for a curvy road that came down a mountain and then emptied to a train track, which the concept is that the brakes are special on this vehicle, or new style or something like that. Everything, almost every picture we took had some concept behind it. And the layouts were very specific. I mean, you had a spread of braking story, you had an acceleration story, you had capacity stories. So we finally, because we needed this picture and couldn't find a location, I found this road just north of Glendale, as I recall. And my set builder's name was Jerry Day. Built this these railroad tracks for us. And then you can see he and his team back there adding some little danger to the road there, adding some rocks and all that. And this was actually a rain shot, which is supposed to make it even more dangerous. So here's how the picture ended up being used. And I thought it was, I think it had a lot of impact. I mean, it looks realistic to me. And so it was a lot of fun to do that. Trucks have always been a big favorite of mine. I like being out in the middle of nowhere. For the same client, maybe it was the same year, we were in the sand dunes doing this picture. This is out at Dumont Dunes, which is near Baker, California. One of my favorite places to shoot. And this is probably an opening spread in a catalog with lots of type and what have you. As I recall, there's an assistant of mine just beyond the vehicle with a shovel, picking up sand and throwing it behind the car to create the dust, as if the car is driving through there. The other advantage of shooting trucks is, you run into circumstances like this picture. Zebras are very rare in California. And I was actually using him in a picture I shot for Toyota. So it took me forever to tame this guy, but anyhow, I persevered. And here's another sand dune shot, by the way. Same location, different client. And I talked my client into allowing me to position the car wherever I wanted. And then we would build a sand dune in the foreground, and the truck or the vehicle is actually on a hydraulic lift that we brought up right to the right height. And here's the piece of equipment we use to make that sand dune. And there's my client. His name is Dickie Peach, wonderful man. Let's see. So now we're going to get into some sets. Again, here's another set. Again, at the same airport. That worked well for us. And this particular year, my client liked the set idea. I had first done it, I think, for Ford. And he liked what it was, how advantageous it was, and all the crews can be in one area, and it's productive. We could do 1 or 2 shots a day. And but then as his client at Dodge Truck got enamored with the strobe box look and wanted to do each shot set up so that you could light it with strobe box and then have it lit at sunset or sunrise. So here's the strobe box shot. And so I would do that at dusk with a dramatic, semi-dramatic sky behind me. And the vehicle was set up at an angle so that it would reflect the sunrise the next morning. And so we would get those 2 shots and then go on to the next set in vehicle the next day. And the cost of that is phenomenal. I mean, these boxes are expensive, and do 2 shots for 1 major had never been done before. Here's another strobe box shot, this time for Ford on a location at one of the colleges in Los Angeles. I forgot the name of it, but it's always been kind of a favorite of mine. And although the car is not a favorite of mine, but I love the location. Here's one for Chevrolet. This was shot off of Melrose. Probably someplace in Hollywood. And I think we worked till like 2 in the morning because I remember the bars got out and it was chaotic, to say the least. I mean, there's a bar right around the corner, as a matter of fact. This is for my Toyota client. And this strobe box was actually mine, which means that my assistants loaded it into a truck and drove it out there from Detroit.
What is it, about 30 feet long?
Yeah, it's 30 feet long and 10 feet wide. And I actually based my design on Shimira's large Shimira, just extrapolated to be 30 feet long. So the distance from the strobe head to the diffusion material and all that stuff was basically, I used Shimira's concept. And it was very successful. This shot we also did. So my camera, it was an 8x10. I had my camera on a fluid head, a big motion picture fluid head, because we did a motion version of it too, or a pan. So the car's driving by and I'm panning.
Panning an 8x10.
Panning an 8x10. I've got a Nikon or a Canon clamped to the top of my 8x10. And anyhow, this was another shot that was, hadn't been done before necessarily. Well, I take that back because here's another one I did for Chevrolet. Anyhow, this was done in Michigan, and it was a shot into the sunset, and it's a rear shutter sync. So this might have been shot 4x5. So the rear shutter sync on a view camera with the Copal shutter is really complicated, and it took a lot of time to finesse it. But it was like milliseconds before the shutter closed. You'd have to have a chart for your shutter speeds and when it was going to go off. It was complicated. Another way of accomplishing motion on 8x10 is this way. And this is where the camera and the vehicle are attached to wires, and there's a motor driving them, and it's pulling the camera and the car at exactly the same speed. So all the things you see blurred in the background and the foreground are static. And what the background is a big painted backdrop that I got from one of the film studios in Los Angeles. And then the foreground is dried or grasses from a landscaping company. And if you look, there's at the back and the front, it's hard to see, but there are wires, and that's what's pulling the car back and forth. So that was actually developed by a studio called the Boulevard. And they were like the major players, the biggest players in the world at one time at car photography.
Yeah, I remember Dean Collins having a tutorial using a motorcycle to do something like this.
Well, the strobe box concept actually was first done on motorcycles by Mark Coppels,
Hmm.
who then went on to be a director. He got out of still photography many, many years ago, but I don't know. Jim Secreto actually had the first strobe box in Detroit, and he might have been inspired by those motorcycle shots as I was. And then lastly, on the motion 8x10 shots is this technique, which Tom Burkhardt, I think, originally came up with this idea. And this is everything's moving but the car and camera. So the car's up on a flatbed tow truck, or a flatbed, not tow truck, but semi-trailer. And the background is a semi-trailer with a piece of huge black duvetine over it and like branches of green material stuck on it. And in the foreground, you have carts that are on tracks, and they have green material on them too. The wheels are spinning because the car's jacked up on jack stands just a little bit. And then you've got fishing line wrapped around the tires, and another assistant is pulling the wheels. So you get a perfectly sharp car with a feeling of motion. And I did this probably a half a dozen or a dozen times, something like that. But anyhow, this is one of my favorite examples of that technique.
Very nice. Great.
Other set shots, I mean, sets were big, as I mentioned earlier, but here's some that were done by a man named Bill Tonneson. And Bill was he was a Phoenix landscape designer, and somehow got into doing sets for the automotive world. And so this is for Citroën. It was a project, again, out at Deer Valley. And we would try to design the set so we could make more than one, use the set in more than one image. So like here's the water feature and this copper colored wall. We use the same pieces in this shot, although maybe modified somehow. But that way we were able to economize and not have to build a completely new set for every shot. In the studio, we did sets as well. Here's a simple one for our Chevrolet. It's called A Body in White. And that was, I think Jerry Day might have done that for me. He was my #1 set builder in Los Angeles, and my favorite set builder in the Detroit area was Bruce Scharfenberg. GMC for a few years was doing some projects that I got involved in that incorporated studio sets. And here's an interior. I mean, that's a lot of material. I think it's not steel grating. I think it's fiberglass grating that is a little bit lighter than steel, painted black. And then I just lit it with direct light, and then also lit the interiors of those vehicles. What you're looking at are what we call bucks, where you cut the car apart and then reassemble it so you can see the interior from just about any view you want. And that was a big business. Car prep companies made a lot of money doing that, and also it allowed us to take some wonderful pictures of the interiors. They don't do it anymore. It's the idea of cutting up a car now is no client will sign off on that. The same, I think the previous year, this shot was made. And this was at, I think we took over a huge tennis facility outside of, in Scottsdale area. I mean, it was gigantic. And there would be 3 or 4 photographers doing these big sets in the same building, and that would allow the client not to have to travel from one studio to the next and what have you. But the complexity of these things was incredible. And the concept here is that apparently the brakes were a big deal, and this was supposed to illustrate how the car wouldn't swerve when you hit the brakes. And of course, I don't know, you see these metal, these spiky things on the side were made out of metal. And once the pavement got wet or the floor got wet, I wouldn't let my assistants go out there. It was just too slick, and I didn't want to lose anybody. But I mean, it would have been a problem. But we had to come up with some interesting solutions to visual problems. Like the tire track going in is kind of important to the picture. And the way we did that, as I recall, is we jacked the car up, the back end of the car up, and then rubbed silicone or Vaseline or something like that on all around the tire, on the rear tires. And then we pushed it in to the set where it's going to be. And then when we wet the surface down with what you call Hudson sprayers, the water would repel off of the Vaseline, and you could see the tire tread as clearly as we do. But I mean, this was done on one sheet of film. And, you know, I'd throw on diffusion and have them step on the brakes, or somebody would hit the tail lights and it would make the lights glow. And, you know, I might have 4 or 5 exposures, but all done on one sheet of film. And the epitome of this whole look is this shot here. And what the concept is, and don't ask me why, but it's supposed to be like a jet fighter coming up to the deck of an aircraft carrier, and this is the lift that it's on. So that's what we were trying to emulate. But this was captured on one sheet of film. And I would have vignettes on C-stands that were marked off about where they needed to come into, so that we could block off different areas of the image, and then light for it specially, like this surface that the car's on, or the lift that the car's on. All that dry ice fog was a separate exposure that was strobe, and then the rest of it was lit with tungsten. But I would imagine this shot took close to 3 days to make perfect. Lots and lots of time, but at the time we all thought it was worth it, you know.
So when you say tungsten, you're working with like Mole Richardson,
yeah, 2Ks,
2Ks, 1Ks,
1K.
minis.
Yep, that's what I would use. I never used 5Ks for some reason. I don't think they were controllable enough, but I'd use lots of 2Ks and 1Ks and Inkies. Here's another example, a little bit different. This vehicle and the rocks in the foreground were shot in the studio, and this is a background that I'd shot out near Page, Arizona. And I actually shot this in Jim Secreto's studio. Mine must have been busy. So I don't know, Jim, do you remember that? Maybe. Okay.
You're muted, Jim, if you wanted to say something.
All right. So anyhow,
I remember that, Jim.
Who's that?
Priscilla.
Oh, Priscilla, were you on that job?
Yeah, we did that in the studio and went out and shot the other piece.
Yeah, that was I love that Page area, and yeah, okay, great. It's nice.
Yeah,
to see
it was a
you.
great shot.
Thanks for joining in today.
Sure. Good to see you.
Good to see you. So I think that's it for the studio stuff that I'm showing you. I'm going to show you that I actually took kind of normal pictures too. Here's a shot I did actually as a sample, and I think the Explorer might have just come out, or maybe a new body style. But anyhow, this is Dumont Dunes again, north of Baker. And this image has been retouched. You can see there's two film codes on it. So anyhow, they would used to, when digital retouching first came on the scene, they would retouch a scan or somehow digitize the transparency, retouch it, and then output another 8x10 transparency, which they would use for reproduction. So that is, I think we took out tire tracks in the foreground and some tire tracks in the background and that kind of stuff. The rest of the pictures I've shown you, though, have not been retouched. Here's a shot I did in Colorado. This was shot for Toyota, and this was an 8x10 with a 1200 millimeter lens on it. Nikkor made a convertible lens. It was 600, 800, and 1200, depending on
What elements you
which
combine.
element you had on. I
Yep.
forget if you changed the front or the back or both. But anyhow, it was a great location. It was a national monument out on the west side of Colorado State Monument. I think Debbie was on that job with me, as she was with many of these others.
Yeah,
She
that
was
was
at
Grand Junction.
Grand Junction. Okay, here's another one you were on, Deb. This was a heritage story for Camaro. This was an ad. It wasn't a catalog piece. And the only difference is that theoretically you got a bigger budget and what have you. And we had set this up. This is at the dry lake bed, not Rancho Mirage. That's where I played golf. Mirage, like it's a dry lake bed. What is it called? Mirage, El Mirage. El Mirage. Yeah, there we go. Okay, so we set this picture up. I don't know if we had to find the cars or not, but anyhow.
Quite a history of Camaros there.
Yeah, it's a heritage story. And of course, the new one's in the foreground. So I saw set up for sunset lighting the day before. And, it looked fine. It was just a normal picture of cars nicely lit at sunset. And I thought it could be more. So I convinced my client to let us come back, leave the cars there, the camera there. We got a security guard to come in. And we left everything where it was. And we went to a hotel in Bakersfield. No, some town near the dry lake bed. Barstow, maybe? Barstow.
I think Victorville.
Victorville, there we go. And then came back at dawn or before dawn the next day, because I knew the sun was going to rise on the behind the cars, be more dramatic. And we just filled in the front silver car with a direct light strobe. And this is the way they ended up going for the ad. It was much more dramatic. Impact has always been key, I think, in advertising photography. They kind of drilled that into you at RIT. So here's another one that Deb was on too. This was taken in Park City. And we were doing, I don't know, 3 or 4 or 5 shots for GMC in Park City, which in the late or early spring or late winter shouldn't be a problem. But for some reason, there was no snow in Park City. Here's like the scouting shot for that. And that's not enough snow. The concept is, that there's just been a snowstorm. And coincidentally, scouting a few days earlier, I was in a snowmobile accident, totally at my own fault. And we didn't know it, but I had a compound fracture of my L1 vertebrae or something like that. And I was incredibly sore taking this picture. But luckily I didn't have to shoot it the next day. It was 2 days after the accident. But here we are, we brought in, again, I think Debbie probably saved the day, or somebody did. This is the machine. We brought down big dump trucks full of snow from the top of the mountain, and they just brought down load after load of snow. And this snowblower is what they used on the interstate to clear the mountain passes. And every now and then we'd hear it catch a rock, like a big rock, and we watched this thing sail out. And we were just waiting for it to go through a window, but we got lucky, and it never, I don't know if any of them even hit the building, but it was a possibility. Let's see. What's next? Oh, now we're up into the late 90s, you guys. I've skipped a number of years, probably 5 or 6 years. In the late 90s, I was doing a lot of work for Ford. Bob LaPerriere was the creative director at the time, at least on part of the business. And Lowell Jackson ran the truck business, as I recall. And we were doing, this was part of a 6-week project where we shot both into the Detroit and rest of Michigan, as well as Utah and California. And this is one of the few times I'd had to, I don't know if we got behind schedule or if they moved up the, we were going to lose some prototype vehicles, but I actually had to charter a plane to take my clients and I from California to Utah so we could scout our locations before my crew got there with the vehicles. And that was kind of cool. But this is in the Tejon Ranch area, just off the 5, right over what's called the Grapevine. And Jerry Day is actually my set builder, is the model on the right. And he's out there because we had to put all those fence posts in. Most of them were like non-existent. In fact, you see them, they kind of stop 3/4 of the way down. But I thought it was one of my favorite shots of that year. And then this shot is probably my absolute favorite. And this was done from a big lift. This is by San Luis Obispo. And here's the lift, here's the shot. I think one of those vehicles is I bought a motorhome. Oh, getting a call from somebody.
That's okay.
Excuse me.
We'll just
So I bought a motorhome in the mid-90s, and I turned the back end of it into a lab so I could process 8x10 or whatever film I was shooting tests on location. And it came in, it was very valuable on shots like this because I had a lot of wind buffeting my camera and the arm around. I was up about 40 feet. And,
so were you doing a dip and dunk E6 in the back of that?
It wasn't dip and dunk. It was a roller transport. It was in a tube and it would spin. I forgot the name of the processor.
Yeah, that's okay.
But anywho, that was kind of cool. And I only got maybe out of the 50 or 60 sheets I shot, maybe 5 or 10 absolutely sharp pictures. And this picture's always been one of my favorites. And it was shot with a 120 millimeter lens on my 8x10. Also part of that program was this picture. And this is, now we're going to get into rig shots. And so the rig shots are where you have a carbon fiber arm of some sort coming off of the vehicle with a camera mounted to it. And so the car and the camera are moving in unison.
Mm-hmm.
And they, you only have to go about 20 feet. In this case, it's going up a hill and it's dropping back, just coasting back, but it looks like it's going, 50 miles an hour. So I've retouched, or I didn't retouch, but the arm is retouched out. But in this picture, you'll see the arm attached. Everybody's standing in front of the vehicle, but the arm is running off the back of the car. And I shot that 4x5. Anywho, and then you can see how many people it takes to do pictures like this. Considerable. I must have been taking the picture because I'm not in there. Now we get to a few things that I've done that I don't think I'll ever do again. And that is things like this. This is extremely dangerous. And we did have, one half of the road blocked off, but the vehicles coming down that road were huge lumber transports. And, all they had to do is hit the back end of that thing. And my assistant and I would have gone flying down here. So I don't do that again. And I won't stand on a leg of a helicopter either anymore. I did that once and won't do that again. Won't do this again either. This is too dangerous for me. And Mike Dean was hanging on for dear life. I don't know how close he came to letting us go there. But anyhow, I won't do that again either. And here's a shot that I put in here because it's kind of complicated, and I would hesitate to encourage a client to try this again. Horses are not like dogs. They don't stop when you stop. They're not trained. And that became a problem because I've got this big arm coming out from the car. And eventually I had to stop because the road was ending. And the horses just went and jumped right over the arm and the cameras. And these guys, the wranglers would, they were wild. They just go and get them and bring them back. And this was a tough picture to get. Here's how it ended up looking, and it's just not worth all the effort, I don't think. But anyhow, I don't think I'd recommend trying that again. Let's see, I've got a couple other behind the scenes pictures. This is a typical camera setup in the 80s and 90s. I went digital in around 2002 to 2003, sometime in there. For a while, we would shoot both because our clients weren't sold that this new digital technology was going to work. Here I am with my assistant, Marv Slocum. We were shooting in Arizona in the winter. And we had talent in the shot, and that's how I would talk to him. I would have a mic with a speaker, battery operated speaker, and I could give them direction from the camera. So it was kind of like this Montana job and the Ford job and all that. I was traveling about 6 to 8 months a year. And I had a daughter who in the year 2000 was 6 years old, and I had a son who was only 2. And I realized that I was missing out on a lot of their life. And since I owned a studio outside of Detroit, I thought it would be best to try to utilize that more and not be away from home. I still shot on location, but usually only in the Michigan area. And so I really got into my studio work. And a couple years later, I started working on a new look for the Ford F-Series. And this is what we came up with. And it was a very soft lighting that we added contrast to and post. And this was all shot digitally, by the way, with one of my first phase 1 backs. And as I recall, actually, we had a sliding, it had a slider on it. So we had to take 2 captures to give us enough megapixels to make a really sharp image. But it was probably a 40 megapixel capture by the time we were done, 220 megapixel captures put together. But it was a real successful look. They used it for 2 or 3 years, and I got all the work for that product and some of the other Ford products too. This is another truck I shot in the initial round, and we shot these at South Bay, by the way, out in California. Maybe the vehicles were out there for TV production. I don't know why, but we did. We shot all this stuff in just south of Los Angeles. It was a big studio, and worked out great. Here's one that's a little bit different. Same kind of lighting, but we built a set on a stage called 1880. And again, I don't know why we didn't use my studio, but at one point I did add on to mine. It might have been under construction. But this was shot at a rental stage down the street. Now, here's some examples of some trucks that I shot in Michigan. It was a commercial truck program that I thought was pretty successful. And this was we had rain, we made it rain, and I lit the vehicle with strobe. And then the 2 lights down in the grass are actually not headlights. They're just 2 strobes that I put about 8 feet apart from each other, or 6 feet apart from each other, and they made the headlights. but I've always liked that shot. And for the same program, same client, Bill Savage is his name. I shot this picture. It was another dramatic picture. And then for Ford truck, this was a fun job. I went out to Oregon with the art director just to shoot back plates and foreground plates. And then we came back to the studio and shot vehicles, and we dropped them in. And I've always loved that rock there. I thought it was pretty cool. And the truck looks good too. So, you know, I can't really cover every job I did, and that would be crazy, but I did a tremendous amount of work for Buick over the years. Some of my favorite pictures are these covers I did for 1 year. I forgot what year it was, but it was the early 2000s. And I was digital at the time, so maybe it's 2004 or 5. And I thought they were always kind of elegant. We would take bits and pieces of the car and explore that and light it so that you had these swoopy, beautiful shapes. I also was one of the photographers who did a series of billboards for what they call the Dream Cruise here in Detroit. It takes place every year on Woodward Avenue, and Chevrolet would buy up almost every billboard along the way. And this was one of them, and the copy lines were always wonderful. I mean, it gave the writers a real opportunity to create. And I probably shot a third of them. And then Kenny Stidwell was another really talented guy, shot probably the other 2/3. I don't want to forget that I used to shoot a lot for clients in Los Angeles. This was an Infinity project, and this illustrates a type of lighting that I really liked, and I kind of elevated it from to not a science, but I had some trusses made and put these KinoFlow tubes in it, and I could fly it on my rails up in my ceiling and move it anywhere in the studio I wanted. So anyhow, this was a successful shot of the launch of the G37 Infinity Coupe, one of my favorite shots. And then because I had a studio and I had a friend down the street from my place who was one of the top car restorers in the world, a company called Classic and Exotic Services, Brian Joseph, I had access to all these wonderful vehicles. So I would shoot some fun stuff just because I wanted to. And I shot things like this. This is a Duesenberg, as I recall. Here is a GM concept vehicle, which didn't come from the restoration company, but that's the LeSabre concept. And I just shot these for fun. Actually, GM sent me that after I did a project at their design staff lobby. Here's a down view of it. I mean, if you're into car design, which I am, having the opportunity to photograph these wonderful old vehicles, it was special. And I put a lot of effort into them. By this time, I was completely digital, and I've been working in Photoshop since the mid-90s. So I would do all the retouching on this stuff, and I created the surfaces and backdrops. And in this case, this was created from smoke shot against black. And then I inverted it and stretched it and added a little color to it. And that's what created the foreground and background. And that car is called a Bucci Alley. And that's quite an automobile. Here's a Peugeot that I always like this shot. And I created that backdrop from some underpasses of the 210 freeway, actually. And here's a few more. The Delage, it's a wonderful, wonderful French manufacturer. the body, the coach makers are what made the difference in these vehicles. Here's a Corvette concept from 76, I believe. It's the original mid-engine Corvette concept that now has finally become a reality. The 61 maybe Maple Shark was one of my favorites. I shot this for Haggerty magazine. No, maybe it was Corvette Quarterly. And we were doing a story on the concept, Corvette concepts. Todd Kramer was the art director. And then one of my favorites of all time is this Fiat that I put into a Frank Lloyd Wright building that I shot. And I think I shot this in 2015. And I didn't stop shooting samples at all, ever in my career. Although I haven't shot too many in the last couple of years, but 3 years ago I did, and I'll show you some truck samples I shot in Flagstaff area. But here is, so back to, I told you about how I took some time off from traveling, and around 2009, 2010, my kids were grown up pretty much, and nobody really missed me too much, as it turned out. So I started taking location assignments again. And I was awarded the launch of the Chevrolet Volt, which is a big deal. And Debbie was the producer on that. And I think Jerry Capel might have done the locations. So I got back into location photography. And this was one of the most successful shots of the shoot, I think. And God, we got set up. It was a dawn shot. We got set up, and that light was only there for 15, 20 minutes before we got into a shadow from a hillside or a building or what have you. But it's a really nice location. As is this. This is a rig shot. They've retouched the rig out, and I'll show you another example of what a rig looks like in a minute. This was an office building that we really had to beg to get into, but this is the entrance to the office building, and the color was very cool. And so we made a picture there. This location is down at a university in Orange County. It's a Japanese American university, and nobody had ever shot there before. And probably, I don't know if anybody shot there since, but there's some really nice locations there. Then back to Michigan. We're now up to 2012 or so, and I was shooting a Viper program, and I shot these vehicles at a tarmac at an airport, and then we went to the racetrack and shot backdrops. So these are strips, and anyhow, here's another view. This is another shot I like a lot from that shoot. Great paint job on that. So I had this car, and I thought I'd do a sample. And I don't know if I found the foreground first and then thought about it, but anyhow, here's the shot. It's a little deep. It's supposed to be deep. But you see all the snakes and this great scary fountain or whatever it is. It was a fountain, but anyhow, I'll show you the pieces that made that. Here's a detail that I brightened up so you can see all those snakes. And then on the right is the set that I created in the studio to shoot those snakes. And anyhow, that was a lot of fun. And it got the attention of everyone, but it never ended up getting produced. It was probably too literal, vipers and snakes and all that stuff. And here's the shot that I got the foreground from. This is on Belle Isle, part of Detroit. Up around 2000, and now we're going to go up to 2015 and 16. I did some early work on the Ford GT while it was still a high security vehicle. We shot this in the studio that Ford actually has in the basement of their world headquarters. And then the foreground, the surface, and you can't see much of the background, but that was all done in post. So electric cars, because I've been successful with the Volt, a product called the Bolt came out. It's another job Debbie helped me on. We shot this up north of San Francisco. This is the wine country area, as well as down in the Los Angeles area. And so this is a rig shot. And as I recall, it's a 1.5 seconds at f8. So that's the car's just coasting down that hill, and 1.5 seconds of exposure is enough to give us that feeling of motion. Here's the same shot. And you can see the arm coming out from the car. It's bolted to a plate that they bolt to underneath the engine. And at the end of the shoot, what you traditionally do is just drop the arm down, unbolt it, so you can get the fascia uninterrupted by the vehicle. Although you don't have to do that, but we do. A couple other shots I did. I mean, I'm showing you these pictures because I really thought they were nice executions and great pictures of these cars. It's an electric car. That charger was not there. The cement things were, those were set pieces. I mean, we brought the charger in. I just thought it made a great location for a charging shot. And then the hero picture, which is one of my favorites, is this one. So we were there all day long. We were there from dawn to dusk. And for all I know, we were there the day before. I can't remember. We might have even done more pictures there. So this picture, this car was another high security product. In other words, nobody really had seen it other than the people that are supposed to see it at GM and so on and so forth. They try to protect the launch of the vehicle so they can maximize their suspense. So we have a great big black wall behind my camera. I mean, it's huge, and it's hiding the car from a hillside that is really a big hillside behind me. And at one point, I couldn't, the wall was interfering with the way the car was lighting the horizon you see, which is real pretty there. The wall was blocking that. And I said, you got to drop that wall. And lo and behold, there's a spy photographer up in the hillside, camouflaged. He'd been there all day, just waiting to get a look at this car. And he snapped away. And the next morning, we all got notified by the folks in Detroit that our security had been violated, and we weren't doing our job. But nobody really thinks about that anymore. So I don't. I really like the picture. It would not have been that good if that wall had stayed up. Let's see. The next couple of pictures I'm going to show you are cool because I shot them in New York in January, and there's no snow. That's special. And what else is special is the car wasn't real. These are CGI cars, and we shot the back plates, and we shot what's called domes, which are files that give the CG artist the data he needs to create a realistic looking automobile. So that car is not real. And the same with this shot, this next shot. And I mean, we were really fortunate to get halfway decent weather in January. I think Scott Duchesne was my producer on that. Scott's on this. It was a tough one. I mean, we did some shots that, I mean, they kept changing locations. It was a trying shoot, to say the least.
The garbage pickup was a problem.
What's that, Scott?
The garbage pickup was a problem.
Oh yeah, there's garbage bags all over the goddamn place. Yeah, it's always something. I mean, it's always something. So I also have made a name for myself over the years of being good in the studio shooting car interiors. And I didn't touch on any of the business I'd done for Alfa Romeo, and I didn't talk about the Japanese coming to me for months at a time, the Subaru folks, both the Japanese and the domestic clients. I've shot in Europe a number of times, and I've shot in China 3 times. So I've skipped a lot, but I don't want to, I want to show you this car interior because I really thought it worked out great. It's a Alfa Romeo product. And Scott Markle is the art director. And what I would do here is I have a camera on a rail and I shoot the front seats, and then I'm able to slide the camera, oh, maybe a foot to the left and shoot the back seats. And the perspective difference we can manage in post, and it allows us to get a much greater legroom shot for the back seat. You know, and that I bring that up just because that's how it's accomplished. But the interior really looks nice in that shot. I did shoot some samples a few years ago, truck samples. I had lost out on a truck job and I thought maybe I needed more current pictures. So my assistant and I went to Flagstaff, and it's just he and I rented trucks from used trucks from the local Chevy dealer. And I also got a truck out of Phoenix that I rented for the whole week I was out there. It was on it was like an Airbnb for car rentals. I forget what it's called, but anyhow, that's this truck. And this is a drone shot. I'm a drone pilot. I love it. I use it a lot in my architecture as well. And so this is one shot. And then from the ground level, I did this the same morning. And then basically the same location, but a different day. I had a Chevrolet with me and I knocked that off. And then I found a wonderful location about 30 miles west of Flagstaff. It was a huge lumber yard. And I thought that would make a great location for my trucks. So I shot this and I did this drone shot. And I thought that worked out well too. Now I've only got a few more things. Here's some more current pictures. This is a shot taken in Palm Springs 2 years ago. And my client was Lincoln, and it was a dealer piece of some sort. And Ian Citron helped me with this. I'd known Ian for a number of years, and he has a relationship with the Palm Springs Air Museum. And without him, I don't think they would have allowed me to take these pictures. I mean, we moved these jets around. It was really a fun shoot. We did all these pictures in one day. Probably did a few more than this, but these are the ones that we liked. And this is the picture they ended up going with. But I also took this shot from a lift that they were able to provide me with. And, you know, I did all the retouching on this, by the way. There's really not much retouching on the actual vehicles. But I do believe I enlarged the vehicles in the pictures on both of them. And then at the end of the day, coincidentally, one of the two remaining or three remaining Ford Tri-Motors was there at the airport. So they allowed me to take a picture in front of it. And that's worked out well. But it didn't end up being used. So I mentioned that an agency I worked with in the early 80s, I'm still working with. And the last job I did with them was just over a year ago. And this is, there's 3 pictures I'm going to show you. And these are all studio vehicles. I shot the cars in the studio. And then I put together, well, I comped together, but I worked with Craig Morrison, one of my favorite retouchers. And we came up with this look for the vehicles on a big wide open tarmac. And this is a heritage story again about the first GT 350 and then the new version. And I did a bunch of pictures. I'm going to show you a few. Here's another one. This surface with the tire tracks I shot years ago at the GM Proving Grounds from a lift. I was out there doing something, and actually the eye level is much higher than what you see here, but you're able to compress those pictures and make voodoo them so they work. And then the final shot is from that shoot, and again, a studio shot, just a lot moodier. So I think that's all there is, you guys. I hope you've enjoyed it, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Yes, Steve Sherman was asked if any chance the Oregon rock backdrop is called Shore Acres.
I don't remember.
Okay.
I'll tell you where I think it is. It's not far from Smith Rock.
My question to you, though, is doing all this car stuff. I also know you as an architectural photographer. When do you have the time to do that?
Well, I didn't start shooting architecture until the early 2000s. And I haven't shot any architecture with film. So it was, 2003 or so. And, I just work it into my schedule.
Cool.
And up until last year, I mean, the car world always paid my big bills, but now my architecture is creating more revenue than the automotive work.
I'll have to have you on again to talk about architecture.
Well, I'd be happy to if everybody enjoyed it,
Sure. The folks in the
architecture
audience have
world-
questions. Go ahead.
Okay.
No, you were saying something, Jim?
Oh, I was just going to say, the architecture world, I think that what I've done automotive wise is probably more interesting, or I've had more greater experiences than the architecture world. I mean, it's more of a regional business. I haven't traveled the world to accomplish it.
So Stephen Shore just popped into the chat. It's always great to see another RIT grad. Have you done light painting work on any of your cars?
Yeah, we used to play with that a little bit, but I didn't pursue it. No.
Cool.
We do that. I'll tell you where we do that is in interiors with Kino flows, actually, but not so much on exteriors.
Yeah, if people in the audience have questions, feel free to unmute and ask or type them into the chat. Either way.
I must say that everything you've shown us is just jaw-dropping, dumbfounding. I'm very happy I've never been your competition. When we did when you did the shoot at the Air Museum with the jets and the Lincoln Aviator, I was amazingly impressed, or overwhelmingly impressed, with your attention to detail and your imagination. I remember when you did enlarge the photo of the Aviator in that one shot, right on the spot to see what it would look like. I just thought that was just absolutely brilliant. So.
Well, thanks, Ian. Yeah, it was a fun shoot. I enjoyed that thoroughly.
So Jim,
Yeah, hello, Jeff.
I know we've met, and I actually remember renting your studio for some reason to shoot a portrait of a Chrysler executive. And I thought it was funny in hell that I had this great big huge psych and I was just shooting this little portrait. But the psych actually worked out really well.
Cool.
One of the things that I got a kick out of, because I used to say the exact same thing until Photoshop, I got it all in one shot.
Yeah.
No retouching required. In the 80s, large format, you shot cars and stuff, and I shot studio and concept, but it was something. It was a real skill and talent to get everything in one shot.
Man, I'm on a conversation here. That's my dog and my son just got home. Yeah.
But so conceptually, you seem to have survived the Photoshop digital invasion pretty well. I did too. I mean, I was an early adopter. Huh?
I embraced it without a doubt.
And I started doing the digital imaging myself in the early 90s. But prior to that, did you ever work with Raphael down in Houston?
Was that a lady?
Yeah, Digital Transparencies Inc., that big French woman.
Yeah, I remember her, but no, my clients would have worked with her because she was one of the top people at the time.
Yeah.
And I know that she worked on some of the work that I shot, but no, I didn't have any direct contact with her. But that was, the car retouching world is a world of it unto itself. Once I'm done with the photography, I mean, sometimes I'm asked to look over it and and work with a retoucher of my choice, but usually it's bid out just like the photography is, and the low bid gets it. So it's a whole nother world, and those people are so good at it. What I do is about a third of what they are capable of.
Yeah, Sasi is asking, what inspires you to focus these days on architecture?
Well, I started shooting architecture because I had a client that wanted me to shoot at a location. It was a shopping mall in the north of Detroit. And in order to shoot there, I mean, they weren't very interested in having me there. And they made a deal saying if I shot a house that they were sponsoring, that I could shoot at the mall. So I shot the house, and I enjoyed it, and I started working with that architect more, and also the shopping center hired me, and then I just started, working more and more in architecture. I enjoy modern design. I have a book out called Michigan Modern, an Architectural Legacy, and it's will be going into its third printing someday. It's basically sold out now. But
how did you hook up with Jim Caulfield, who's also a really good friend? He was here, but he had a meeting at 1 o'clock, so he had to skip.
Yeah. Well, Jim, I think he emailed me a few years ago. He liked the work that he'd seen, my architectural work, and he wanted to know how I was doing some of it. So he came into Detroit at one point, and being the Frank Lloyd Wright expert that he is, we had cocktails at the Turkel House, which is a marvelous home in Detroit that Frank Lloyd Wright designed, and then we had dinner, and so we're friends. We've just we talk about equipment and approaches and stuff like that.
Yeah. Harris Fogel was asking if there was a Jobo processor that you had in the back.
It was a Jobo. Thank you, Harris.
So were you shooting Ektachrome 6117 or Fujichrome or?
I shot both. But yeah, when I started, so that I would only have to stock one kind of film, I would get the tungsten, which was what, 6118. Yeah, and that way I could stock the same film for studio and location and just convert with filters when I'm outside. But
interesting.
I started using Provia and Velvia in the 90s. I just like the color and the contrast better.
I just want to say I thought that was fantastic. Thank you. And it's also, for me, it's a bit of a trip down memory lane because I lived and taught in Palm Springs. And of course, that area has car shoots all the time.
Well, that was, yeah, we spent tons and tons of time there.
And I think there's a facility on Indian Avenue that was notorious or famous for having all the under wrap cars. In the middle of the night, you'd see these transports.
Yeah, that's called DST.
DST. And do you remember a photographer named Mickey? I think it's Mickey Fine. Does that ring a bell?
It does not. No.
Out of Detroit, I think. Anybody?
No. If he's out of Detroit and shot cars, I would know.
Well, he came to my class, and the students were absolutely just blown away. They had no idea. And
I wonder if that must not be Mickey Mcguire. Mickey Mcguire.
Oh, Mcguire. Yes,
Mcguire guy.
Yeah, really tall.
Okay, well, Mickey Mcguire was a partner in the Boulevard. He started it with Jimmy Northmore, and they were the largest car studio ever, and they had offices in London and California and Detroit and maybe even Atlanta at one time. Mickey has taken, I don't think he's with us any longer, but he has taken so many pictures of automobiles in his career. He's an inspiration to anybody that talks to him, or was an inspiration.
Yeah, I
Wonderful man.
I thought he was great.
His brother, whose name was Mickey also, coincidentally, was an art director at Darcy, and he gave me my first job as after I left, stopped being an assistant. Good man.
Well, Stephen Shore mentioned that he worked at GAF in the mid-70s, so he appreciates your mentioned the GAF films.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Well, they flew me. I was had moved back to Detroit. I approached them while I was still at RIT. Nothing's electronic. It was just a letter and some pictures. And I think they called I was living at my folks' house, and they called my mom, got a hold of my mom, and she thought there's something fishy about it. She didn't buy it. And so she said, well, he's not here right now. And
I remember
finally,
go ahead.
anyhow, they flew me to New York and took a shot a portrait of me. And, it was, my life might have been different had I had that campaign run, but whatever.
Do you remember there was also 3M 640T tungsten grainy
No.
film around that same time?
I didn't use that, but I'd used the 500 and I pushed it to stop. It was beautiful.
Yeah, so
Hey,
we have a
Jim.
few RIT folks in the audience.
Yeah.
Yeah, same class, 76.
Oh, okay. Hi, Jack.
How you doing, Jim?
Good.
Great presentation. Really enjoyed
Thank
it.
you. Glad you enjoyed it. Appreciate it.
Jim, I have
Oh.
a question, which is that so much of your work is about imagination coupled with flawless technique. Has digital impact, did shooting digitally make any significant difference in the resulting imagery, or
Oh,
was
yeah.
it just a different tool?
No, it was huge. It was like mind blowing. I didn't have to be as good as a car lighter. I could light part of a car, turn off those lights, turn on some other lights, light another part of the car, and then just blend the two captures together. And that was an amazing thing for me to see. It's what we can do digitally is you're only limited by your imagination. With
But
film,
I mean,
you were
yeah,
limited.
some of the strippers though, back in the early days. I worked in a catalog studio where we'd shoot everything to size on 11 by 14 and hand it off to the strippers, and they just razor blades would put pieces in together and do
with
wall
Ruby
pages.
list and all that. Yeah.
Yeah, that was crazy.
Yeah, that's a lost art, to say the least. Where is Jack? Jack, what did you were you in the photo illustration program in 76?
Yep, illustration.
Okay, well then we must have known each other. Does my name seem familiar?
Your name seems familiar. I worked at the Cage. I was a townie. And
Okay.
so I worked at the Cage. You're still on the shit list, by the way. Still some equipment missing we want to talk to you about.
Oh, I see. I see. Must have been that 105 Nikkor.
I still have a 75 millimeter super angle on that I should give back to the Cage.
Yeah, that's a nice paperweight there.
I don't have anything left over from RIT, but I still do have a slide projector from GAF that I never gave back.
Yeah, I think the record when I was there for the most days on the shit list was Greg Heisler. He used to take stuff out and just not return it for like weeks and weeks on end.
Yeah, yeah. Well,
I see Debbie left you a message over in the chat there.
okay.
Enjoyed viewing your incredible images.
Yeah, she was great. Debbie was wonderful. She produced a number of big shoots for me, and I'll tell you what, it's tough. It's tough to produce those location jobs.
Well, we
Yeah,
had a lot of
Susan?
good times too, Jim.
Oh, we did. We had
So
a
many
ball.
stories behind every shot.
Yeah, yeah. There are tons.
Jim
of
Secreto, you have your hand up, I see, but you need to unmute. We can't hear you, Jim.
Show them the.
Yeah, here's the mug. Can you see me now? You're on mute. He's still talking.
Can you hear me?
Now we can hear you.
We hear you now, Jim.
I just want to thank Jim. It was an excellent presentation. And everyone that viewed it, it was a rare opportunity to see the highest level of car photography over decades. Jim's one of the best, and
Thank you.
he deserves all the credit he gets. He's a hard worker and has great vision. And thank you, Jim.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. Thank you. Okay, I guess there is a video about Cadillac and me. I did they had a car, an electric car that came out. It was based on a Volt, but it was called the ELR, and I did the launch photography. And then they did a behind the scenes video of me shooting the car and presented that to the dealers. So I do have a Cadillac video. I just forgot about it.
Sasi's asking, what was it like to work on the CGI stuff? Does it excite you the same way shooting on real locations does? Well, actually,
No,
you were on location.
I
It was the,
don't want to do it. You
yeah.
know, it's no fun. It's like it's just, you know, it's not what I like to do.
Understood.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, thank you so much. This has been great.
Yeah.
Does anyone else have any last minute questions or comments they want to make, or is there anything you want to say to the audience?
Yeah,
Well,
Jim, I have one thing.
Yeah.
One thing, Jim, I want to say, good seeing you. Good talking to you.
Scott, good to
And,
see you.
It was great fun working together all those
It was.
years. So I appreciate it, and
Yeah.
good
Well,
luck.
Maybe we'll do it again, you know.
That would be an excellent idea.
You never know. You never know.
Yep.
The phone rings occasionally.
Twice during this call.
Yeah, right. Listen, I really appreciate everybody showing up. Priscilla, it's great to see you, and Deb, and everybody else. Did I don't know if Joe Miller made it or not. I think he was on the list at one point, but let's see. Yeah, I don't see Joe on there. Okay. Well, guys, thank you very much. I think we'll call it a day, huh?
Cool.
All right,
Thank
Jim.
you.
Thank you, Jim.
Thanks a lot, Jim.
All right,
Talk
guys.
to you soon.
Take care.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Jim. That was great.
Thanks, Deb.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone. See you next time.